Learn the latest news surrounding a third bid for Wesley Fofana being rejected again today by Leicester City. We have updates on alternatives as Adam Webster of Brighton is being looked at, as well as updates on Hudson Odoi, as well as Conor Gallagher attracting even more interest now from Palace and West Ham. Ton of things to break down, discuss. Make sure you guys check out the massive video on Leao and Gordon. And before we get into anything, I need to get one big plug out of the way first. Today's video is brought to you by friends of the channel and OneFootball. With the transfer window now ending very soon, OneFootball is the app to have currently to stay up to date with all the latest club news surrounding us, as well as big deals happening across Europe as well too. As you guys can see on screen, we have an indication behind some of the latest deals happening across Europe. It's always nice to stay up to date with what other clubs are doing in the window too. And by using the profile section and of course customizing the important clubs, players, national teams of your choosing, we can get a better insight behind club specific news. And as you guys are seeing right now, everything currently is dropping on Anthony Gordon as well as Rafael Leao. So OneFootball for me is very handy. It kind of makes my job a lot easier as well too. And the beautiful thing is, it's absolutely free. So if you guys go to the description below, download OneFootball and honestly try it out for yourselves. So now let's start with things and let's discuss the latest loan news surrounding Callum Hudson-Odoi. Now him and his team must be incredibly busy throughout this period. They have interest left, right and centre from across Europe. We have a new name that's been added to the list, and Bayer Leverkusen are showing interest to try and sign him. Now this is quite an interesting and exciting development. Of course though, let's look at reality. He didn't feature against Leeds United even though he was part of that matchday squad. Raheem Sterling originally had hopes to mentor Callum throughout the season, but I think for me now, he is kind of beyond mentorship at this point in time. He needs consistent minutes now because that is the only way to grow and develop. And when you're at a big club like this with so much competition, the moment you don't play well, you're out of that team and someone else replaces you. It's not sustainable for guys under 23 years old, but I think now is the perfect time from now to go on and become that star boy elsewhere for one season. Regardless, let's look at Bayer Leverkusen. They have a host of talented players and they're known for giving opportunities and chances to young guys throughout the entirety of the club. Currently they have great talents like Azpi, Wirtz, Adam Hojek that they signed from Sparta Prague as well too. And it does feel like they need someone down that left hand side, and Hudson Odoi on the left, Azpi on the right, and maybe Wirtz or Hojek in the middle. That could be a very exciting attacking three. And I guess you're thinking a few things now. We know that Bayern Munich, for example, have shown a ton of interest in the guy over multiple seasons. If he was successful at Bayer Leverkusen, potentially, if he did sign for them, of course, he is putting himself back on the market. And here's where things will get interesting because currently he does have 2 years left on his existing deals. So by the time his loan spell ended and he returned back to the club, he'd have 1 year left. And if he's successful, the worrying thing could be is that many clubs would attempt to try and sign him away from us. And with 1 year left, knowing that you haven't necessarily been in the best environment with the club to, fulfill your potential here, could Hudson Odoi feel like it is time for me to move on now because I don't trust that I can achieve my potential if I remain here? So there's definitely a few things to think about, but one criteria that Bayer Leverkusen can offer Hudson Odoi is that they do have European football for this season, which is the perfect way for Callum to really show what he can do, becoming that star boy down the left hand side. So let's see what continues to happen. So much interest for Callum, and right now we move on to the next big story and let's discuss Wesley Fofana. So now let's discuss the news, and Leicester City have rejected a third offer for Wesley Fofana. That means that they've rejected offers of 50 million, 60 million and now 70 million as well too. Now, one of the main reasons behind why they rejected our current deal is that even though the base fee offered as part of this deal was substantial and was quite large, the thing that put them off was that the conditionals, essentially the additional fees, clauses, etc., weren't realistic. So I guess we could take some educated guesses. Maybe we put down things like they earn another 5 million, for example, if he was part of France's World Cup squads. They have a ton of talent there. And that is the type of money that Leicester City can't, guarantee that they can rely upon, because there's a possibility that Fofana wouldn't actually make the squad. So, it's an example I gave, but it's quite obvious that Leicester right now need a few more assurances before allowing the player to leave. And currently they're still hoping that they can command in excess of 80 million because they sold Harry Maguire to Man United for £80 million. Now, I think Leicester City have to realise that you kind of took advantage of dummies. Most people knew that Harry Maguire was worth nowhere near that amount of money, and all those years later since he left Leicester City, his valuation is nowhere near close. So you can't, for me, rely upon receiving that same figure. But of course, there is some context potentially that makes it more of a reason for Leicester City to need more money to sell Wesley Fofana. Now, when they did sign him from Saint Etienne for around €36.5 million, there was a 20% sell-on percentage clause inserted in that deal. Now, at the time, Saint Etienne had really poor finances. They needed to raise some funds, make some money, so that's why they were forced to sell Wesley Fofana. So naturally, once you minus away the money that Leicester originally paid to sign Fofana from whatever the final fee is that we agreed to sign Fofana for, they still owe 20% of that profit back to Saint Etienne. So, you know, it does kind of repaint the picture a tiny bit. However, for me, in my opinion, I really feel like this type of money for Fofana is a bit outrageous in my opinion. It feels like the money would be better suited now spending that on a midfield player or spending that on attacking reinforcement. It feels like they're the areas in which we need to see more improvements in. And I think for me, we can't forget that if we sign Fofana, it means that Gallagher would be leaving. Currently, Inter Milan are showing a lot of interest to sign him. I've spoken about this story before. Lukaku is of course attracting Inter, telling them how good Gallagher is and why he'll be a worthwhile signing to make on loan. So if Fofana comes, it will be one in and one out. So in my opinion, if we had to rely upon Gallagher for another season, he won't be the difference that costs us from winning silverware or getting Champions League spots. Let's be realistic, because if that was the case, we would have seen this with our own two eyes last season, and for me, he has improved more as a player since then. Still, before I end things, where do we go from here now? It's not necessarily over. Now, if you guys watched my feature alongside journalist Ben Jacobs, he gave us some incredible insight behind the strategies that, you know, clubs use to be able to sign players. And it does seem that there could be a strategy on our side at this point in time. Now, we know that Leicester kind of have to sell Fofana now. When you're missing out on matchday squads, that kind of reveals a lot about the player's mentals if the manager can't rely upon him in Premier League games. So there's still time for us to structure this deal in a way which does satisfy Leicester. They liked the base fee included in this offer, and if we made the additional fees more realistic, that gives us the possibility then to sign Fofana. But it does make sense why we wouldn't do that at this point in time. The closer it gets to deadline day, I feel there's more pressure for Leicester City actually to have to give in to our demands. Realistically, they need the money now to reinvest back into their team, and we could use Fofana's willingness to leave Leicester City to sign for us against Leicester as time continues to go on. So there's still a lot more to come from this. Time isn't necessarily over just yet. Let's see what happens. So right now it's time to move on to the third story and discuss Fofana alternatives, with Adam Webster of Brighton being the name listed to act as his replacement. So there's still a possibility that if our strategy does work against us, we still need to find a replacement in this window, and Webster has been a decent figure now, being an ever-present figure on the left-hand side of Brighton's back three. You know, he's had a decent start to the season alongside his defenders as well too, and the Daily Mail do report the story suggesting that he would be an alternative. And I guess it's not surprising because we have heard of Webster links earlier during the window. So in my opinion, it kind of feels like as we've exhausted, you know, all of our top centre-back targets, and now that they aren't available anymore, we are going further and further down our defensive target list, and now Webster, of course, is more of a higher priority compared to where he originally would have been during the start of this window. Now, I'd imagine that Webster would cost an absolute fortune. He only signed a contract extension last year, and his deal does expire in 2026. I think it'd be incredibly hard to sign another player from Brighton, even though I guess they have Levi Cole there as the acting replacement, and it seems like Cole's will need a bit more time, of course, to win favour to get in that first team, because this has been like a tried and tested back three now for the past few seasons. But still though, at 27 years old, Webster has matured his game, and I guess he does bring all those essentials that you'd expect to see playing on the left-hand side, and just in my opinion, maybe he could be someone who could add a bit more stability to the left-hand side alongside Cucurella. Now, hear me out. Let me explain myself. Obviously, Koulibaly, Cucurella, they've not had too much time to really build that understanding working together as a partnership. But for me now, these past two games, whenever I see guys playing opponents on side, it's either because Koulibaly's out of position or Cucurella is out of position too. It makes sense, they only just come. But when I compare that to the solidity and that relationship between Rudiger and Ben Chilwell, right now it's nowhere near the same at this point in time. The gaps and distances are too far apart. So could there be a possibility that if Webster was the alternative hypothetically, Koulibaly moves down to the right hand side, Webster plays on the left hand side and forms that relationship again with Cucurella? Who knows? But to end with the story, in my opinion, if we missed out on Fofana, let's not waste money for the sake of it, and let's just keep Gallagher. I mean, worst comes to worst, the January window isn't too far away from us, but realistically I think we have decent enough depth now, and defense isn't our main issue. Our main issue is more of the midfield and the attack in terms of breaking teams down and scoring goals. So now we end things with the final story, and let's discuss the latest news surrounding Conor Gallagher. Now, a host of teams in the Premier League continue to monitor the player, as there's still some belief that as the window draws near its end, Gallagher could be made available depending on the types of business and deals we're able to get done. We still don't know what's happening with Frenkie De Jong, but we know that we've agreed personal terms already. So if Barcelona are forced to have to really push and sell, there's still a possibility that we could make a move to sign Frenkie De Jong, and if that's the case, then I don't really see there being a proper future for Conor Gallagher. Who knows what happens? Maybe we might see Tuchel alternate between like a 3-4-3 and a 3-5-2, and if that's the case, Gallagher has more midfield protection and he can bomb forwards a lot more. Regardless though, Crystal Palace are readying a 35 million bid near deadline day in case Gallagher is made available, and after they've upgraded their team again during this window, signing Doucouré from Lens, Gallagher, Doucouré, that could be a nice midfield three alongside the front three they have as well too, and the back line in Guy and Anderson. So, you know, things are happening at Palace, and knowing that the World Cup is later this year during winter, if he returned back to Palace, if he found out there's no future for him at this club, a return to Palace could help, and that could be like the strongest way for Gallagher potentially to force himself in the national team squad before the year ends. Last season he did get 11 goals and assists from 34 Prem games, and playing as a number 8 is his best role. I'd like to hope that as the season goes on we might see Tuchel alternating between that as well too, and who knows you guys, after we saw Conor now taking part in an open training session at Stamford Bridge, Ruben potentially moving back into midfield as well too. In a way, I guess we could afford to lose Gallagher if push came to shove, and we do have enough options currently to make do without him. Still, West Ham are still sniffing behind the scenes. They're close to signing Everton finally, and one of the main reasons as to why they wanted to sign him permanently is so they can get first dibs on any players like Broja or Conor Gallagher that could be made available when the window comes to its end. So there's still a ton of things to come. West Ham, their season right now is looking quite mid. I kind of feel like defensive teams eventually get found out, and maybe Gallagher could give them that new blood of life, making Moyes move away from a 4-2-3-1 now to a 4-3-3, which could probably help Bowen and Benrahma even more, but let's see what happens. I think Gallagher potentially just needs more time to adjust and acclimatise to the team, but I guess when you're a young player here, time does have a habit of working against you over time. So you guys, on that note, I'm going to wrap things up, keep things moving. Watch for today's content that drops some big stories. It's getting exciting now as the window is coming to its end. I'm Nini FC, this is BlueLionsTV. I'll catch you guys later with some more videos. Cool.